Joining me now to discuss BTC price and other Bitcoin news is our weekend review panel. We've got CoinDesk managing editor of markets, Brad Keoun, with me in Austin. Hello there, Brad.
Hey, Christine.
Good to see you. Happy Friday. All right, so Brad, early in the week, we saw a lot of shorts and bearish outlooks. So where is this growth spurt in Bitcoin coming from?
You know, I mean, what we're seeing today is a little bit surprising, frankly. You know, things were looking pretty bearish, and the talk from the central bank officials has been pretty hawkish all week. You know, you saw the Waller thing just now. But the market's just kind of going on its own and extrapolating forward and, you know, kind of showing a completely different direction from what it seems like the Fed officials are trying to send as a signal. You know, Helene Braun, our economics correspondent earlier this week, had a story about the Fed's basically telling us that it's going to try to knock down stock and crypto prices. But, you know, I think people are just kind of looking at the economic situation and all the facts on the ground and saying they don't see how the Fed's going to be able to stay this tough. And so we're seeing this relief rally today. You know, who knows if it's right or just another little day of speculation.
And yet the Fed is still sounding very hawkish. We're hearing from members of the Federal Reserve. They're saying, you know, we may see inflation coming down a bit, but we're still going to move aggressively. So are the markets calling their bluff, basically?
It sure looks like that. You know, I mean, I think, you know, there's this belief that, well, I mean, if you go back in history and look at what happened in 2018, the Fed jacked up rates to about 2.5%, and the markets puked. And that was even after the Trump tax cuts, which was a big stimulus. And they just turned around and basically the grease, you know, the wheels of finance started to seize up, and Powell had to pivot. And people think that's going to happen again. You know, I mean, the Fed has all this tough talk, but they go out onto the market and make some comments, and maybe it helps. But yeah, I think people are just kind of becoming, you know, I mean, who knows? Again, it's just some of this stuff is pretty random.
So what, this price jump is a bet on later this year? So they think that, well, I don't know, the Fed is going to get a little more dovish and that things will ease up, or, you know, a recession could be around the corner.
I guess that's the concept. Yeah, I mean, we've got this inflation data coming out next week, and people are just looking at all sorts of things. You know, well, the big, you know, the big market indicator that people are looking at today is the dollar index. That hit a 20-year high earlier this week, and it's kind of crashing all of a sudden today. And you know, I think that people are saying the ECB had a big rate hike this week to 75 basis points, and people are worried maybe some of the other central banks are also going to have to get pretty aggressive, and that'll just make the dollar, theoretically, if you think about interest rates, that could make the dollar a little incrementally less attractive, and so that is kind of the concept of why the dollar's down. And yeah, as you said earlier, Christine, historically, the Bitcoin trades opposite from that dollar index.
Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, Bitcoin and Ethereum are diverging. You know, early in the week, we saw Ethereum with a huge rise, and Bitcoin, you know, had a moderate rise. But now today, I mean, Bitcoin is really soaring, and Ethereum is coming ahead, but not as much as Bitcoin. So what's going on here?
This is a really fascinating story here, Christine. I mean, our analyst, market analyst, Glenn Williams, wrote about this earlier this week, and just kind of looking at the charts for Bitcoin and Ethereum, and they're you know, usually they sort of travel in tandem, or Ether's a little smaller. It had been kind of like it trades like a levered play on Bitcoin. If Bitcoin goes up 5%, Ethereum goes up 8% or 10%. But lately they've kind of had their own stories. Bitcoin is very much a macro story now. Here we are talking about inflation and the Federal Reserve, and that's the key driver for Bitcoin, and it's pretty highly correlated with stocks. And then, all of a sudden, Ether is very much trading on this Ethereum merge coming next week, theoretically. And so, it's kind of interesting. They've decoupled a little bit, and there's no news on the merge today. We knew the merge was coming next week yesterday, and we know that today, and there hasn't been much change there. What's changed is what's happening in the macro market. So now Bitcoin's getting a lift. It's kind of like in the Bitcoin versus Ethereum story. It's like the latest chapter. It's Bitcoin strikes back. But I mean, who knows how it all plays out? But that is what we're seeing today.
All right. Well, Brad, we also have Christie Harkin joining us, our managing editor of technology. Christie, great to have you on. So you've been tracking Coinbase and Tornado Cash. So apparently Coinbase is backing a lawsuit against the U.S. Treasury Department over its recent sanctioning of the Tornado Cash mixing service. And you have some thoughts on this.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think this week has been sort of all about the regulation side of the crypto sphere. We had Gary Gensler on earlier this week on CoinDesk TV and saying, the main thing is that we need to enforce the regulations that we've got, and we've got to have crypto companies doing what they're supposed to be doing. There's a concern also that Ether could be considered a security, especially after the merge, because of the new proof of stake mechanism. And what does all of this mean for Bitcoin? Well, when we look at all of those things, if you include what's going on with Tornado Cash and privacy, when you include how different cryptocurrencies are being examined in terms of whether they are built on top of helping out the ecosystem as opposed to providing new tokens. When you look at exchanges, are exchanges registering? What kinds of tokens are they registering? Are those securities? They don't have to worry about Bitcoin so much because Bitcoin has been widely considered not to be a security. So that is not something that Bitcoin itself has to, or people who like Bitcoin, because Bitcoin doesn't care, but the people who like Bitcoin don't have to worry about whether or not it's going to be considered a security. But what's interesting about the Coinbase and the Tornado Cash side of things is whether or not we are going to see sort of institutional censorship of transactions that go through mixers, or transactions that have some sort of privacy layer to them. And with Bitcoin is not private, as we've talked about. It has a pseudonymity, but not an anonymity. And there are processes that developers are working on in order to make Bitcoin more private. Now, if that is the case, and we're talking about code, we're talking about freedom of speech, if code is speech, then this could possibly have implications for Bitcoin down the road when we're talking about using Bitcoin mixers, for example, or other things that are privacy enhancements that are being being enhanced by different changes to the protocol, like we had with Taproot. So even though this is an Ethereum story, Tornado Cash was an Ethereum mixer, the way that we're seeing companies like Coinbase and others backing lawsuits against the SEC for overreach, really privacy overreach, this will be interesting to follow if you're into Bitcoin privacy at all.
Definitely. And, if code is speech, then that could possibly be protected by the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution.